All right, let's be real. Forget testing if 1 plus 1 equals 2, that's kid stuff. Today, we're going to jump way past those textbook examples and dive into how senior developers actually test the real, critical systems that power a business.
This right here, this quote, is everything. It's the entire mindset shift we're talking about. See, a junior dev might just test if a single function works correctly, but a senior dev, they test what happens to the entire user journey. We're talking from login all the way to checkout, if that one function fails. That's the huge difference, you know? It's not just about protecting code, it's about protecting the business.
So, here's our game plan. First, we'll get into that senior mindset. Then, we'll walk through testing some supercritical systems. We'll pull it all together by learning to think in full flows. And then, of course, we'll cover the common mistakes to avoid before showing you exactly how to nail the interview.
Okay, so let's kick things off with the why. Because mastering this stuff isn't just about writing better code. No way. It's about showing you have the kind of thinking that gets you promoted, that gets you trusted with the company's most important systems. When you get this right, you instantly prove 3 things. First off, you show you understand real-world architecture, with all its messy dependencies and complexities. Second, you prove you know how to focus your energy on testing what really matters most, the business logic. And third, you demonstrate that crucial senior developer mindset. It's a total game changer.
All right, let's get practical. Enough theory. We're going to walk through 3 absolutely critical systems that I guarantee you will run into in your career.
First up, the front door to any application, the login system. Now, it seems simple, right? But if it fails, it can lock every single user out. So how does a senior developer tackle testing it?
Well, the difference here is night and day. A junior developer often stops after testing the valid login, the happy path. But a senior developer's first instinct is to immediately stress test all the ways it can fail. What about a wrong password? What if the user isn't even in the system? They're not just testing for correctness, they're testing for resilience. Okay, let's move on to our next case study, and this one involves money, so the stakes are even higher, the payment system. This is where your business logic smacks right into external dependencies. The senior insight here is what I call the critical trio. You absolutely have to test for 3 things: a successful payment, a clear failure like an invalid amount, and, this is the key part, the interaction with the external payment gateway. Now, you do this by mocking it, which just means creating a fake, predictable version for your test. You never ever call a real API in a unit test. It's slow, it's unreliable, and hey, it might actually charge a real credit card. Our final case study is the validation system. Now, this could be anything from validating a user registration form to some super complex business object. The challenge here isn't just about getting it right, it's about doing it efficiently. This is where you see the senior approach to efficiency really shine. Instead of writing, say, 50 different tests for 50 validation rules, you use a single, really smart test method. This technique, people often call it a parameterized test or a theory, lets you feed a whole bunch of valid and invalid inputs into just one test, covering all your bases super efficiently. I mean, it is the definition of working smarter, not harder. So we've seen the tactics for individual systems. Now let's zoom out and put it all together into the big picture senior strategy, thinking in full flows. Seriously, if you take only one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this question. This is the pivot point. You stop thinking, does my code work? And you start thinking, what is the business impact if my code breaks right here? It completely reframes your entire approach from just looking at isolated methods to seeing the whole interconnected business logic. So to wrap it all up, here are the 3 pillars. First, you've always got to test multiple scenarios, the happy path, the failure path, and all those weird edge cases. Second, mock your external systems. Your unit tests have to be fast and self-contained, period. And third, always think in flows, constantly asking that critical question, what happens if this fails? Now that we know what to do, let's flip it and talk about what not to do. Let's go over the common mistakes that just scream junior-level approach to testing.
You got to avoid these red flags. Testing only the happy path, that gives you a totally false sense of security, because one unexpected input could crash an entire feature. Ignoring edge cases is basically just waiting for your application to break in production. Calling real APIs makes your tests slow, fragile, and expensive. And finally, mocking a service without actually verifying the interaction, well, that's like sending a letter and never checking if it got there. The test is completely meaningless.
And now for the payoff. How do you take all this knowledge and use it to absolutely crush it in a technical interview? Let's run through some rapid-fire questions and the perfect answers.
Okay, imagine the interviewer asks you this. It's a classic for a reason, you know? They aren't just testing your coding skills. They're really testing your whole thought process.
The perfect answer, something like this. I'd mock the user repository and then test for 3 key scenarios: a valid login, an invalid password, and a user not found case. An answer like that is perfect. It's concise, it uses the right lingo, and it proves you think defensively by immediately bringing up failure and edge cases. Okay, next question. They follow up with something that involves an external dependency. This is your moment to really shine.
Here's the killer answer. First, I'd mock the external payment gateway. Then I'd verify tests for a successful payment, a failed payment based on our business logic, and an invalid input case. That is a home run. It shows you know exactly how to isolate your dependencies and that you automatically think in terms of our critical trio: success, failure, and bad input.
And finally, if they ask you to just summarize your whole testing philosophy, this right here is your golden ticket. This one sentence proves you get the why behind all of this. It's not about code coverage percentages or ticking a box. It's about making sure the business can keep running smoothly under all conditions. And that, my friends, is how a senior developer thinks.